شغل الادميرال مايكل هويت سابقا منصب نائب مدير العمليات العالمية مديرية العمليات هيئة الاركان المشتركة في البنتاغون للبحرية الأمريكية. كان مسؤولا أمام مدير العمليات ورئيس هيئة الاركان المشتركة للرقابة والتنسيق في الأمور التشغيلية في جميع أنحاء العالم، وشمل ذلك عمليات الاستطلاع العالمية وعمليات الفضاء الإلكتروني وعمليات دعم المعلومات العسكرية والبرامج الخاصة. حاصل على درجة بكالوريوس العلوم من جامعة جورج ميسون ودرجة الماجستير من جامعة الدفاع الوطني. تشمل مهام هويت للعمليات البحرية وطائرات الاستطلاع الأولى في باترول سرب 10 وقيادة باترول سرب 8. وقد أدار عمليات في أيسلند، إسبانيا، جزر الأزور، صقلية، بورتوريكو والعديد من المواقع العسكرية في جميع أنحاء العالم. عمل أيضا كضابط المراقبة لمجموعة القتال المجموعة الرابعة في البحرية الأمريكية والقائد الجوي للقوات المضاربة لقوات الحلف الأطلسي، كما قام بدعم العديد من المجموعات القتالية بما فيها تدريبات الناتو. كانت أول مهمة مشتركة لهويت هي هيئة الاركان المشتركة كمساعد نائب مدير عمليات المعلومات حتى عام 2010. تولى هويت مهام القائد مجموعة باترول والاستطلاع حتى 2012، وعمل كنائب رئيس هيئة الاركان المشتركة حتى فبراير 2013. يقود الادميرال مايكل هويت الآن مع مجموعة من هيئة الاركان المتقاعدين منظمة قوة السلام والازدهار الدولي تعنى بمشاريع برامج الطاقة النووية، مجال تعاملها يشمل المملكة العربية السعودية في المرتبة الأولى. Retired Rear Admiral Mike Hewitt, you are the CEO of International Peace Power Prosperity, and you are also retired Rear Admiral in the United States Navy. You are most welcome on Saudi 24. My first question is about your description for the strategic relationship between Saudi Arabia and USA.
Well, thank you, Maria, for having me, and I very much appreciate the opportunity to discuss those issues. And I think the relationship between Saudi Arabia and the United States goes back to President Roosevelt and King Abdulaziz in 1945 when he paid a visit to the king, first U.S. president ever, to establish that strategic relationship, that indispensable partnership between the United States and the kingdom that exists till today. And I think it is one of the most long-standing relationships that we've had going back to the 1940s. And I think in particular with President Trump, what he's done is reestablish that indisputable partnership between our two nations, and I think it remains very, very strong.
How do you see they get over some incidents and defense collaboration between the two countries?
Well, I think the defense collaboration between the two countries has withstood many different political issues going back many, many years. I always say that the strong relationship between our militaries and the strong relationship between our intelligence communities exists regardless of the political differences that sometimes occur. And so I think the defense cooperation and the close relationship that our militaries have established and maintained on the war against terrorism, on protecting the Gulf and the free flow of energy, have continued to prosper. And I don't see anything on the political side that will interfere with that strong relationship.
During your mission in the United States Navy, how do you can you tell us some experience did you get through the cooperation with Saudi Arabia?
Certainly. We flew maritime patrol missions in Iraq and in Afghanistan, and we flew out of Bahrain, and we've flown out of Al Udeid in Qatar on the war on terror. And I don't think a lot of the Americans understand the support that we receive from Saudi Arabia, the ongoing support in those missions, and I think we've been very successful in both of those missions. And I had the opportunity to work side by side with many of the Middle East partners in the Gulf Cooperation Council in both protecting the Gulf and piracy missions and all of the things that would occur. So we've had a very strong relationship, and I spent the majority of my time in the war on terror flying missions over Iraq and Afghanistan.
Can you tell us if you agree with the increasing number for U.S. troops in Saudi Arabia especially?
Well, I really don't get that involved in the day-to-day mission or the operations, but I do know that with the Fifth Fleet and the Central Command, they're in constant dialogue with Saudi Arabia and the other GCC nations on troop numbers and support and foreign military sales, and I do believe that they are in very close cooperation on whatever those numbers need to be.
Are you thinking that the U.S. Is winning the war on terrorism and with her allies in the Middle East?
I think under President Trump, we've done a very good job of eliminating ISIS in the Middle East. Obviously, the caliphate is much larger than just Syria or Iraq. I think that we have a long way to go, and it will be an ongoing process. I don't think you can ever say you've won the war on terrorism, but I do think that we've done a tremendous amount to reduce the risk and set the conditions for stability in Iraq and hopefully in Syria as well.
How do you think, what do you see about the importance of the role of Saudi Arabia in the regional security of the Gulf and the Middle East in general?
Well, I think Saudi Arabia's role in the Middle East is regional, and I believe they've established themselves as leaders in the Middle East, leaders in the GCC. I know we've always seen them in that way in our work on the role in terrorism. And so I think going forward with the leadership of the Crown Prince and the leadership of the Saudi military and our close cooperation on stability matters, I believe that Saudi Arabia will maintain its role as a regional leader in fighting the war.
Talking about the war in Yemen, how do you see the role and how do you look at the importance of the Riyadh agreement that was made by King Salman to stop the war there?
I think it's very important that we have that kind of agreement that allows us to focus on getting past the conflict and getting to stability. I mean, that war in Yemen has lasted far too long, and there's been way too much violence and death and destruction. And our concerns about the Houthis and the proxy networks continue. And I think that Saudi Arabia has taken the role of leadership in that, but I think we have a long way to go. And I do believe that the recent accord is very, very important so that we can move beyond the conflict and start to think about stability.
Admiral, how do you see the role of the Houthis in threatening the navigation in Bab al-Mandab and Canal of Suez?
Well, I think it's very important that we recognize exactly what the proxy networks are doing, how they're resourced, and I believe it's very important that we understand the depth and reach of the IRGC in the Gulf and in other areas, and I think it's important that we keep a very close eye on exactly the growth of those networks.
How can the Trump administration help Saudi Arabia to end this war in Yemen?
Well, I think the Trump administration has done a tremendous amount to support Saudi's effort in the region along with UAE. And I do think that we need to continue to focus on ways that we can end the conflict peacefully, beyond the military support that we've provided. And I do think it would be a mistake for us to abandon our support to end the war. And I think that's the right way to look at it, that the war needs to have an end, and we need to be thinking about the steps that are necessary to end the conflict so that we can give the Yemeni government a chance to reestablish itself and succeed.
They say that Qatar is funding terrorism. What Trump can do with his advisor to stop this?
Well, I think that all of our partners in the Middle East, we have to understand just how complex those relationships are. And we're well aware of some of the support from Qatar and some of the concerns that Saudi Arabia has had with Qatar and the Muslim Brotherhood and Al Jazeera and things of that nature. And I think it's important that we need to address every one of those issues, but they're not binary issues at all. And so I think we need to continue the dialogue with Qatar, but recognize the challenges that exist today because of some of the sponsorship that they've had.
The latest news tell us that the Pentagon is getting $700 billion in increasing the budget of defense in the Middle East. How this can make any collaboration or in the war on terrorism with Saudi Arabia?
Well, I think that the military and obviously the president has established the role of the military looking not just at the Middle East, but at China and the threats we have globally.
Yeah.
And the concerns that we have about the growth of China and Russia regionally in the Middle East as well as in Asia. And so I believe that the budget will appropriately address all of the vital national interest of the United States. And what I am most pleased about is that the president has kept a focus on the Middle East as a vital national interest to our country, and I think the budget will reflect that.
What, in your opinion, is the U.S. strategic challenge toward Iran?
Well, I think what the president has done since taking office, both with walking away from the JCPOA, and I believe more importantly, reestablishing our close ally relationship in the Middle East, has done a lot to address the concerns we have over Iran as the largest state sponsor of terrorism, and of course their focus on supporting the proxy networks and just the destabilizing activities of the Iranian regime. I think the president has done a very important job of creating alliances to address those issues. It can't just be America that addresses the issues with Iran. We have to work with our allies in the region, and I think what the president has done is reestablish those alliances, and I think how he has addressed Iran over the last 3 years of his administration has been very important to destabilize the issues that were taking us on before, and then stabilizing the issues such as the concern over Iran's potential nuclear weapons program. I believe everything he's done has been very important to address those issues.
Admiral, what type of cooperation do you think the U.S. have with Saudi Arabia in the energy field?
I think that we're very excited about Vision 2030. And of course, when we first established our company, we were concerned that the relationship between the United States and Saudi Arabia was based on oil and it was based on terrorism. And those were issues that really weren't as important to the American people. And so we were very focused on a strategy and a relationship that would be forward-looking, that would be aligned to the interest of Saudi Arabia and the interest of the United States. And we saw Vision 2030 as an opportunity for the United States to reestablish a stabilizing relationship with Saudi Arabia. And we think that one of the most important areas for that is the kingdom's strategy on energy. They obviously have a strategy to diversify their mix of energy sources into renewable energy, into clean energy. I think the work they're doing at NEOM is very, very important. And so what we wanted to work on is a relationship with the United States that's tied more to economics and commercial growth, education, innovation, looking at Vision 2030 and saying, how can the United States in the commercial side cooperate and participate in the growth of Saudi Arabia? And in many ways, that's a more important strategy than constantly fighting the war on terror, which is very important. But we wanted to find a strategy that would matter to the American people. Most American people have a hard time even describing who Saudi Arabia is. And we think opening up that discussion through economic cooperation and educational exchanges, and then focusing on Saudi Arabia's development of its diverse energy solution. I actually think that Saudi Arabia could be a leader in climate change and a leader in clean energy.
What is that big role she can play, especially in this year during the summit of G20?
Well, I think that's a very important point. I think that the G20 being hosted in Saudi Arabia this fall is a great opportunity. First, I believe that it signals the importance of Saudi Arabia by them hosting the G20. I think that's a very important signal. I think that climate change will be the most important issue that's addressed at the G20. And I think that there's an opportunity for Saudi Arabia to not only lead that conversation, but develop the kind of programs that are not just for the kingdom, but for the entire region, similar to Aramco with oil. They could be a leader in clean energy for the globe, actually.
So we can ask about the future of the oil production country like Saudi Arabia, or what is the future of this production?
For oil?
Oil, yeah.
Well, and they will continue to produce oil, hopefully for global markets, and I think that market will continue to be there. The challenge for Saudi Arabia is they use, their production of electricity is almost predominantly created by that same oil. And so they're burning their best commodity to create electricity. So I think Saudi Arabia has a very clear vision for diversifying its energy mix to get to more clean sources of electricity, and then allow that same oil to be used for more productive purposes, higher value purposes than using it for electricity. So I think this idea of diversifying your energy led by the kingdom is a very important effort. And at the same time, it will allow them to address the clean energy challenges that we have on the globe.
Admiral, what is the relationship between the globalization phenomenon and Vision 2030 led by the Crown Prince?
Oh, I think that Vision 2030 has a look across multiple continents. And I do believe that Saudi Arabia does sit at the crossroads of those three continents with an eye towards Africa, with an eye towards Europe, and an eye towards the Middle East. And I think that because of their strategic location, Vision 2030 really is a global nationalized phenomena that would empower many countries outside of the kingdom itself. Our focus has been the youth bulge of the country and ensuring that they have a future that's tied to innovation and tied to new industries and that vibrant society that the Crown Prince talks about. I think that, to us, is probably one of the most important strategic efforts that we should be supporting going forward.
Can the trend toward reforms be reversible in Saudi Arabia?
I think so. I think it has to be done at their pace, though. I don't think anybody understands the challenges that this Crown Prince faces in those types of reforms. They're very aggressive. They're very important. We support every one of them. And I think we need to do everything we can to help support the reforms at the pace that they need to occur so that they could be long-lasting and not short-lived.
How do you see the role of women in Saudi women in these reforms and in MBS plan?
Oh, I think they're critically important. I think the reforms that he's just made over the last 2 years. And the fact is, 50% of the college-age students and the college students that attend in Saudi Arabia are women. And the vast majority of the technical degrees are being delivered to women in Saudi Arabia. So as an unbelievable resource for that country, I think the path that the Crown Prince has set for women in the country, women in the workforce, is the right path, and I think we should be applauding his efforts.
Saudi Vision 2030 included also a talk about the youth interest and also the new generation goals. How do you see this sector can be included in this vision?
Oh, I think it's already being included in the vision. I've seen some of the recent reforms with things as simple as the movie theaters and Formula One racing and the things that really capture the imagination of the youth of America being brought to Saudi Arabia.
Dakar rally.
Exactly. Those are the kinds of things that I think Saudi Arabia is one of the most connected countries on the planet. And those are the things that will capture the imagination of the youth. And so I think those kinds of things are very important. And I believe that I've seen many of those things occur just in the last 2 years.
Admiral, how do you see the campaign of Mohammed bin Salman succeeded in fighting corruption?
Well, I think it's been a very tough part of his leadership. Obviously, it's been met with some resistance from some people, but I do believe that if you don't cut off the underlying corruption, then it's hard for the reforms to actually take place. And so I can't speak to every one of the activities that has taken place, but what I have seen and my experience with looking at the institutions that have been stood up, I believe that they are moving clearly towards normal market factors. And if you don't eliminate the corruption first, you can't achieve the goals that are in the vision.
Admiral, how can this important change in Saudi Arabia can reflect the whole region? Mohammed bin Salman, in his speech, he said that this change, this reform is reflecting for the neighborhood. How do you see that?
I think that's correct. I think that many of the reforms, I mean, as Saudi goes, so goes the region. And I think that the success of Vision 2030 will have success across the GCC, across Egypt, across Jordan. I know that just recently the Crown Prince negotiated the Kuwait-Saudi neutral zone for oil production that was in a stalemate for the last 4 or 5 years. And my understanding is the Crown Prince went in and negotiated the settlement very quickly to both the benefit of Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. So I think it's not just the vision of 2030, I think it's the leadership that comes with that vision that will touch the entire region.
How do you appreciate MBS diplomatic relationship internationally, especially with Europe?
Well, you don't create those kinds of relationships quickly. They require long, slow processes. I think he has done a very good job of establishing the economic corridor with Europe. I think he's done a very good job of inviting new industries to the kingdom. I think that's something that Europe will be very interested in. I think that it takes a long time to create those kinds of relationships, particularly with countries in Europe and the United States. But I have been very impressed with what he's done in this short period of time.
Can you elaborate more about how Iranian threats can affect this plan made by the reform plan or the Vision 2030?
Well, I think that anytime you're dealing with proxy networks such as the Houthis or Hezbollah, you're dealing with entities that don't want to see stability and don't want to see the kinds of reforms that come with Vision 2030. And so we need to understand what those insurgencies will do to disrupt those kinds of things. That will never completely go away. So we have to address those issues at the same time, understanding what it's going to take to actually achieve some of those milestones, particularly in cooperation and economic growth.
How do you see America's policy toward Hezbollah and other terrorist organizations in the Middle East?
Well, I think what the president has done recently with the agreement on Palestine is a step in the right direction. But it's a very complex issue, and I would be the first to say, as soon as we try to simplify it, we don't understand it. And it won't go away anytime soon. We have to negotiate and understand every one of those issues. But it's something we've been dealing with for quite a long time, and I think it's something that we're going to have to continue to deal with while we focus on the things that are more important, such as stability and economic growth and the kinds of reforms that we're talking about.
After Operation Soleimani, what's next regarding this organization, like Hezbollah, Houthis, like multiple of organizations in Iraq, in Syria?
Well, I think, again, the president has taken the right approach to dealing with Iran and dealing with the mullahs. And I think he's taken the right approach to walk away from the Iran nuclear deal, because I believe that deal, in many ways, was going to create more instability going forward and not less. And I think the issue with Soleimani has been addressed and addressed effectively by our diplomats, as our Secretary of State is over there just today in Saudi Arabia, to continue the dialogue post-Soleimani. And I mean, I think Soleimani was one of the leaders of the largest state sponsor of terrorism, and was very much in the hands of the killing of many, many Americans in Iraq. And so I think that issue was an important one to address.
Admiral Howard, how do you foresee the future of human rights in Saudi Arabia and the progress in this field?
I think there's been great progress, and I think the progress has a long way to go. But I think recognizing the path that they've set for themselves on human rights, and recognizing that they have been recognized themselves in the international community for their human rights reforms. This isn't something that is coming from Saudi Arabia. It's coming from the international community and the UN, that Saudi Arabia has done a tremendous amount on human rights, and we should be doing everything we can to continue to support their growth.
Admiral, my last question is going to be about the nuclear power program. How do you see the commitment of Saudi Arabia in this regard?
I think Saudi Arabia is following the path of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, and they're following all of the international norms to develop a nuclear power program, a civil nuclear power program. It is very important to diversify their energy, and we believe firmly that nuclear power is an important energy source for climate change and clean energy. And Saudi Arabia, just as like any other country in the world community, if they follow the non-proliferation standards and the goals that are set by the international community, should be able to develop, and we should be supporting their nuclear power future. Obviously, our policymakers on the non-proliferation side have to come to agreement on what that is. And the United States has a very high standard of non-proliferation agreement that we would need to establish before we could do the commercial work. But we really hope that our policymakers can get those agreements signed so that U.S. companies can contribute to Saudi Arabia's nuclear future.
Do you have any project with the Congress on this regard and through your work? I know you visited Riyadh. Can you elaborate more about that, and especially the solar energy?
So we are not dealing with the Congress. Really, it's our policymakers. It's a nuclear power program is really a sovereign nation to a sovereign nation program. And so our State Department, our Energy Department, and our Congress are all heavily involved in negotiating the kinds of agreements that need to occur in advance of the commercial cooperation. In our trips to Riyadh, we really wanted to understand Saudi Arabia's vision of energy and understand the importance of nuclear power in their vision. And so we spent a considerable amount of time in Riyadh talking to KA and others that are really developing the program. And as I mentioned to you before, if they don't find a way to diversify their energy mix, there are some estimates that say they could run out of oil in the next 25 or 30 years. So this is a critical issue for them.
It's important to have the diversification of sources.
It's very important, and we believe that nuclear power is the most important clean energy source to address decarbonization goals, which are very important in the Middle East.
Will you participate in G20 meetings?
Personally, probably not, but we know that we want to help support the issues and the topics that we would expect to be discussed there, and we think energy and clean energy, and again, I think because G20 is in Saudi Arabia, there's a great opportunity to showcase the important issues, not only for America, but for Saudi Arabia and Vision 2030.
Retired Rear Admiral Mike, thank you so much. You are CEO of International Peace, Power, Prosperity. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Maria.